Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. And today is Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. And I'm going to turn the phone over to Michael and say, Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. Apology for being a little bit late. For some reason, when both Jeannie and I tried from our phones, we could not start the app. And so Jeannie restarted her phone and was able to get on. So I'm on Jeannie's phone. Delighted to be here. Glad you're here. And looking forward to just what unfolds today and where things open and go from here. So delighted that you're here. If you have a question or a comment, or something you want to share, push that call button and I'll get a little notification. Let's see. Somebody just said, oh, Jeannie just gave everybody a welcome. So she's on her second phone. And one of the things I want to tie into this codependence idea that we're talking about, these pseudo solutions, and the three behaviors tied to codependence work. And that is that when we're talking about codependence, the corollary to that is what the world calls multiple personality disorder. Remember, we talked about once the power person dynamic is instilled in someone's mind, what happens to do that? Three things occur. Usually it's between a parent and a child, though not always. But what happens is that the parent has more power over the person than the child themselves has. The parent is not functioning as a human being, is not functioning as love, and the child perceives the circumstance as survival. When that occurs, the child's energy field, when you think in terms of the truth of physiology, we don't have a physical form, we have an energetic form that our eye turns into what looks physical. It's convenient, but it's not the truth. The real truth is we are energetic beings. And as energetic beings, when that power person dynamic, when those three conditions are met, the energy field of the child opens wide like a sponge and just I don't know how that sounds on the other end of the phone, but just sucks up every energy in the field. Whether that energy is spoken or expressed or not doesn't matter. Every energy is taken into the field of the subject of that power person dynamic. In the future, for that person, there will only be, until the power person dynamic is addressed, discovered, and forgiven, there will only be three behaviors possible for that person. And the recurring theme of a person's life will revolve around that power person dynamic. The three behaviors, and we could call those behaviors personalities. So you think of multiple personality disorder. There's an interesting piece of work that was done by a medical researcher named Baron. And he, in one particular case that I recall, he had a woman who had diabetes in her normal personality. She was a known multiple. So in her normal personality, she has diabetes. If she doesn't get her medication, she's dead. They take her into the lab. They hook her up to all the measuring devices they've got, brainwaves and all of that sort of thing. And they induce a personality shift. What does that mean? They resonate a different persona. Remember that word persona in Greek means mask. Somebody goes into a relationship with someone who has multiple personality disorder. That is, someone who has a power person dynamic unresolved in them. And when there's little or no stress, the first behavior that people operate by, the persona, the way they express, will be the way that they dealt with their power person when there was little or no stress. What did they do to get along with their power person? And, I usually use the example of, so this is Mr. or Mrs. Nice Guy. And, somebody meets Mr. or Mrs. Nice Guy. They're, mature adults and in a relationship, and they're together for 5, 10 years. And, this person is Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy. And what happens? That's when there's little or no stress. But when the stress starts to build, you think of how many relationships we've watched in the world or that we perhaps know of personally that were wonderful and people got along until some tragic event happened And there was so much stress within the minds of the participants in that relationship that they moved into their alternate personalities. Their alternate personalities could not get along, and the relationship was destroyed. So the second level of behavior in this multiple personality codependence dynamic is when stress begins to build, one shifts out of their normal persona of Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy, and maybe what they do is they become Mr. or Ms. Snarky. So now this person you've been together with for 10 years, enough stress occurs that the automatic decision kicks them into the second dynamic of the power person. What's that behavior? They do under that level of stress, that elevated level, they do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. So here now we've got somebody who's always been Mr. and Ms. Nice Guy, been together 10 years, and all of a sudden it's like, what's wrong with you? What happened to you? You've always been personality A, low stress Mr. and Ms. Nice Guy. Now you're Mr. and Ms. Snarky. I don't like you. I don't want to be here anymore. That's oftentimes when divorce happens. And or the third level of multiple personality codependence disorder happens, and one becomes ultra stressed. And this is the one that's really tough to deal with. Because when one becomes ultra stressed, one who has not addressed and resolved or forgiven the power person dynamic in themselves, they now do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. Third persona, personality. Now, this researcher, Braun, has this woman who has diabetes. She needs insulin. They induce a personality shift, i.e., they change her stress level. And all of a sudden, she shifts into a different personality. And guess what? In this personality, now, of course, everybody knows diabetes is a real physical disease, and you got to have your insulin or you're dead. But when this woman shifts into that alternate personality, there is no trace or symptom of diabetes. And if they gave her insulin, it could kill her. Her physiology has changed. Sometimes people say, well, why would I do this work, delving into all this stuff? Because sooner or later, if you don't deal with the disintegrative energies related to the power person dynamic in your life, it is literally, physically going to be the source of death. And my offering is, we're not designed to die. That's not what we're here for. And so as you do your work, and we had a really powerful conversation with Peter yesterday, and Peter, I see that you're on the line. So if you're here, if you're open to chat a little more, when the stress levels change, when one cleans out one dynamic, then the next layer, the next healing process or healing crisis, as it's called in the system of medicine that I've been trained in. And it's called a healing crisis because it usually involves one of the deeper persona dynamics, one of the deeper behaviors involved in this power person dynamic. And so as you clear out the layers and you reach the next level of vitality, the next opportunity to learn forgiveness shows up. And that means that those layers have to be cleared out. And literally this self, this persona that develops is simply information stored in carbon-based memory, usually generationally repeated, that when resonated into activity takes over the persona, becomes the new mask. Mr. Ms. Nice Guy, Mr. Ms. Snarky, and then this person becomes ultra stressed, and what their power person did was become physically abusive, and they become physically abusive. And you say, what happened to you? We've been together for 10 years and you've been Mr. and Ms. Nice Guy, and now you're physically assaulting me. What happened? Well, here's what happened. The stress is up. The chips are down. And if one does not have the tools, if one does not do the work of cleaning out the power person dynamic, the persona that developed and probably has been flowing in the bloodline for generations, then one loses control. It's not something somebody chooses to do. Remember, we did a workshop in Fort Lauderdale for a gentleman who had a recovery group, an AA recovery group, and he had a large online presence. He'd been sober for 30 years, running AA groups, and he asked us to come and speak, and we did the codependence workshop. And when I pointed out this third level of stress and how the power person dynamic takes over, after the workshop, he came to me and he was like, kind of in a snarky sort of mood. And he's like, well, I know that that's not true because when I was a kid, my father physically abused me every day, and I have never laid a hand on my son. And he was kind of in this kind of hard, tight place. As he said this to me, like, you're wrong. And and my response to him was, well, okay, I hear that you had enough control that you never hit your son, but how much time do you spend controlling your fists? Man, I could have knocked him over with a feather. He just like broke down into, yeah, like every day I have to stop myself from hitting somebody. That's the power person time. That's what his father did to him that he hated the most. And that would be the place where he would go in and do forgiveness around that. And that forgiveness would look like doing worksheets around dad, but it also might look like, you know, rolling through life and somebody at work does something and he wants to haul off and smash them. That would be the situation to do a worksheet. His child does something, and yeah, he's never laid a hand on him, but boy, he's got to control himself. They would be the places to do worksheets to free oneself of that. And I see that Peter has joined us, so we'll hit the button and say, welcome from Sweden. Glad you're here. How do you be, sir?
I'm good.
Oh, I'll tell you, I just really appreciated that conversation yesterday. Your willingness and your openness, I think, has served this whole community just tremendously. How does that whole situation that I just spoke about with the power person dynamic and multiple personality, how's that fit for you?
Very much so. I mentioned the archery situation yesterday, and I can really attest to the personality and i.e. the so-called body changing, because with the archery it's it's a millimeter precise draw indicator, so I do exactly the same every time.
Right.
And in the situation of the competition, it shifts. So my draw length is no longer the same. So I've sensed it several times that, gee, my whole physiology, so I'm changing. I am not the one I was before that fear brought that about. So I've experienced it firsthand several times, how
That's
I'm
it,
changing.
exactly.
And also, like what you said, that it's like it's not something that I'm choosing. It's rather it seems that it's something that I can not choose.
Yeah, there's no choice about it.
Yeah.
It's the same as, you know, it's a pure resonance function. If I hit a middle C tuning fork on a desk and put it in a second some middle C tuning fork, that second tuning fork has no choice. It comes into activity. It is resonated. It moves. And in the same way, if there is a power person dynamic unresolved, and the stress moves to the level of activating that particular dynamic, you can't say, oh, I'm not going to do that because everything changes. There's and you know, one of the things that I love to do is to bring the fact of what the ancient teachings were giving us into how it really applies. And you know, when you make that observation about yourself on the archery range, there's an interesting quote in 1 John where the author says there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And when you spoke yesterday about being on the archery range, and then when you bring that up, you notice how literally right down to the way you draw the bow back, it's different. And what was the dynamic with dad as your power person on the archery range? Fear and punishment. And this is the next layer. And then this same passage goes on to the next idea. And it's just like, this isn't about churchianity. It isn't about religion. It's like literally where we physiologically live. So that particular passage goes on and says, the one who fears is not made perfect in love. And so the beauty of applying, of one, allowing the fear to surface, embracing it, being with it, and then recognizing the goal that's driving the fear into activity so that the dis-ease of fear and physiology and the changes it makes literally in our chemistry and our physiology, our emotions, our mind, our behavior, that being able to cancel the goal that drives that process to activity and collapsing it, bringing literally the active presence of love. This particular passage, the one who fears is not made perfect in love. When I can collapse the fear, tap back into the active presence of love, which of course is a practice, then made perfect, the fear, the energy that interferes, the power person dynamic that is physiologically expressing begins to dissolve. And the other passage I think I mentioned yesterday is, in order for you to live, you've got to die. In order for the true being, that when you're in that connected state, right down to things like doing archery, you do it one way. And when that power person dynamic is activated and resonates this alternate personality, everything changes. That self that takes you out of the perfection of being has to be forgiven, and it's a process. And when we recognize it's a self that has been developing in our generations for eons of time, like we said yesterday, you're the early adopter. Who in your family system do you know that ever even could have conceived of that was what was happening and could have started to clean it up, and you've chosen to clean it up? And I love the fact that you're ready to do another personal code evaluation. And if it works tomorrow, maybe we can take this to the next level, because we've got some personal code evaluations, from the intensives we've done over the last couple of years. And looking at one with what's going on for you now, I think will give some clues on a deeper level as to what your next piece of work is. So I'm excited about that.
So am I then. Freedom from fear, I'm guessing, will be part of it.
That's it. That's it. The willingness to be done with fear.
Because I had that thought today when I was doing some forgiveness, that if I'm really honest, there are very few places in life, in my own house with Tanya is one of them, but there's very few places in life where I don't, if I'm truly honest, that I don't have fear uh, being part of it.
So there's the importance of every situation where fear is resonated in you. You look at what's the to me, the genius that this man Yeshua put together 2,000 years ago of, and you'll notice that you never go into fear unless somebody violates a goal you have for them. You go into a situation, if everybody's doing everything you want them to do, they're fully there supporting you, following your behavior prompts, there's no activation of fear, right? But the minute somebody violates a goal you hold for them, up comes that fear. That's when you can grab that little sucker by the neck and throw it out. And it has to happen. It has to resonate in order for us to take a hold of it and get rid of it. So the genius of looking at, so what's the goal? I walked into, my brother-in-law's house, and he looked at me crossways. And what I wanted him to do is to look at me with love in his eyes. And boy, that sure isn't what I perceived. In fact, that kind of looked like the look Dad used to give me. Cancel the goal for him to look at me with love in his eyes. And I get to drop into what's the unconscious, what's the hidden part of that. Otherwise, that unconscious dynamic, as Carl Jung said, when he says, until the unconscious is made conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. We'll think, oh, that's just my brother-in-law doing that to me, as opposed to, this is what's inside of me and my brother-in-law, my kids, my parents, my spouse, myself in the mirror will resonate what needs to be healed, and it has to be resonated into activity. A lot of people are like, yeah, I want to do this work, but I don't want to look at and deal with that stuff. But unless you're willing to deal with it, it just doesn't happen. So congratulations on your willingness.
Although what you just said, could that be, how do I say that, totally internal, totally my own? Like you say, I have a goal, someone out there is violating. It's my sense is that the fear is here, and it's like I'm the, like I said yesterday, Peter is not, he's not cut for it. He's not making it. He's not doing
Got
it.
it. Got it. In Aramaic, you are your own neighbor, and the law that says keep Rachma for the creator,
Uh,
for neighbor, is the way to maintain self. And so you can do the forgiveness process on any person, place, thing, or event, past, present, future, living or dead, of course, including yourself. And so I walk into a room and I have a goal to look perfect, but I have this old reality that says I'm not as perfect looking as that guy over there. And all of a sudden, that goal to be perfect becomes the trigger for that fear. And bang,
yeah,
that fear becomes part of my persona, part of my mask. It's got nothing to do with the truth of who I am, but this self that's been um, built out of thought disorders that is literally stored in carbon-based memory. You hear a lot of people talking about the, having to renounce the world. The world you need to renounce is the world between your ears. It's not about, the world out there. It's about the constructs that the mind presents that are false, and they're based in carbon-based memory. Now, unfortunately, in a lot of the ancient teachings, they focused on, well, the world of sin, those terrible people out there, the sinners, the ones you need to be afraid of, and all of that gets projected, as opposed to, no, the world they're talking about that needs forgiveness, the only world that forgiveness is ever applied, is to the constructs of one's own mind that are a product of carbon-based memory. And so, when they talk about, you know, nobody will ever figure out the heart. It's so full of the words they used in the ancient scriptures, ravening and wickedness. Well, what that word heart there is the unconscious, and it's the world of our own unconscious that carries those generational patterns. And of course, one of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines in my workshops is that having children is like having your unconscious mind hang out in true living color and Dolby sound. Everything you never dealt with, they're going to bring up because they're literally made of the same genetic material as you are. And so if I carry around this self image and then I perceive that I've failed at fulfilling that self image, then my next worksheet is on myself. And the self that is not true. In fact, Yeshua said, this self, in order for you being to live, you non being have to die. Literally, the non being self, the product of errant ideas about self, usually from the power person, stored in carbon-based memory, what people think of as the world, that self has to die. And it's when that self that gets resonated into activity is forgiven, 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 forgiven. The all of the energetic dynamics behind that false self we're freed from, that self collapses. Now there's room for being. I love the way you brought the Swedish language into that word that it's so recognized as part of the culture's language, that there's I'm living in being my true self, and or I'm I'm not near being. In this culture, many circles they talk about, well, I just wasn't myself. That's what they're talking about.
yeah,
This false self stored in carbon-based memory that needs to be dissolved. And of course, the only thing that will ever kill us, because this is physiology, the only thing that will ever kill us is energetic patterns in physiology that don't belong there. And so the purpose of the world is to kick us in the limitation, to show us what our next piece of work is. And we're not even going to be able to see it until we've done a certain level of work and have a certain level of vitality where we're able to embrace it and move through it. So that's why it can be such a difficult process. And I look forward to it. I'm
You
really delighted to you agreed to do another personal code evaluation. I think it'll be a good demonstration for everybody because we'll look at your last couple and compare and give you some feedback on, okay, so here are some of the specifics that you'll probably benefit from in dissolving that non-being self.
Yes, earlier in the conversation, you used the phrase perfect being.
Right?
And I don't know if I ever heard you say before using the word perfect. And
Hmm.
it seems to me that I go to the archery again, and I go there in a center state. I'm not experiencing the bliss like I mentioned at Heartland way back then.
Right.
I'm not saying that I'm in that space, but I'm in a really
But you're
good
connected.
space, and I'm connected. I'm
Right.
rooted. I'm connected to the source, and I go there, and seemingly, I'm saying seemingly, well, the aim is to have the goal to stay connected. That is my
Right.
goal, to go on the archer range to stay connected.
Right.
And because I know that if I am able to do that, that will be, as you now said, perfect being. And I've
Right.
experienced that. There's nothing else needed. It's great. It's complete. So I go with that goal. And so the question is, can that goal itself bring
That's your
up
next worksheet. That's your next worksheet. You know, I go
which
with the
what?
goal of looking good, of being perfect, and performing well, whatever the specific, your conversation refers to a general, but then when you do the worksheet, and this is sometimes why you'll have to do 77 times 70 worksheets, is because it will, that persona that you're dealing with has a lot of goals involved. And so the goal to look good, the goal to be perfect, the goal to win, the goal to please my power person, the goal to displease my power person, the goal to get even with my power person. If those, remember, there are only two ways to get rid of a goal, and goals are the only thing that drive behavior. And the way you get rid of a goal is you either achieve it or you cancel it. So let's say, just for the discussion's sake, you go back to 14 when you were right on the verge of being that champion archer that you were in Sweden, and there's a particular meet and you get up there and you fail, and you look over and you see that disapproving look from dad, and you want his affirmation approval, but because you quote unquote failed, you don't get it. If that goal's never achieved, that goal's still active in your mind when you go on the archery range today, decades later. And if it's activated into activity, that will be the goal. That will be the shade of goal that will dissolve another part of this persona, this mask that we put on over the truth of who we are as human beings. Does that make sense? Did that fit?
It does. I did some forgiveness earlier today in the morning, and it was again, Peter, as I think 7 or 8 out of 10 when I do forgiveness, it's Peter is 1C, and the feeling I had was I did two worksheets, and the one was despair, and the other one was sadness. Sadness first, and then despair. And the thought connected to despair was Peter wasn't able to do it completely right the way he should today either. And with and then
So
what I
those
wanted,
words would be important to put on the worksheet. My goal to do it completely right.
Yeah, and I wrote that, and like what you said yesterday, so clearly the different power person messages, because then what I wanted here was, again, seemingly tr- aiming to be honest, what I wanted to manage to be and to do as Peter should, as so with a note to be perfect,
Right.
to being perfect being.
Yep.
This is like I'm getting lost in that.
Exactly. Well, what happens is when that goal is active and you perceive yourself as not fulfilling it, then that goal, remember the way that a goal works. A goal is like, the best metaphor I've been able to come up for is that a goal is like the recruiter that goes around to all the high schools to look for the football players that they're going to bring back and, get playing for their college team. So the goal, like the recruiter, goes literally in a flash through your mind, and your mind not only includes the energetic patterns currently stored and firing from brain cells, but also your mind includes all of your genetics, the energetic patterns from all of your genes. So if that goal resonates something from 20 generations ago, or as yesterday you spoke about, geez, this feels something like grandpa coming in. If that goal resonates a genetic memory from something unresolved, then that's going to contribute to, literally, if you imagine this recruiter goes in and through resonance literally in an instant, searches through the whole database, everything that's stored in the system, and recruits that into activity. And the end result of all of those energetic patterns being recruited into activity, the goal being the driver for that, that creates the picture of self that you perceive and the physiological sensations that go with it. And so the importance of canceling the goal that drives that whole process is that when you cancel that goal, that recruiter now being removed, all of that has gone into this pained perception collapses in on itself. Think 9/11 towers. When the planes hit, they collapsed in on their own footprint. When you cancel a goal, that whole pained perception collapses in on itself. And if you get quiet and you allow yourself to drop and go inside, you've got access to literally what happened to grandpa, even though, maybe he was not even alive when you were born. You've got access to that because you've collapsed the 9-bit perceptual construct of your mind, that little tiny framework that holds the energy of pain. And in that situation, you get to free your own physiology and you get to open the energy window for grandpa to be freed up too.
So I cancel that 1,000 times. So cancel it another 1,000 times.
It might be, how long do you suppose uh, father's disapproval of son has been going on in your family system? Let's go back to the movie Valhalla, or about everybody trying to get into Valhalla. If you look at the genetics of the Vikings and such, and how many, fathers and sons, and how much disappointment, and he didn't measure up, and blah blah blah. What's in, change that old commercial from what's in your wallet to what's in your genes, and recognize that it has to be cleaned up. That's all. It has to be cleaned up.
Today during the forgiveness, I touched on that before, that I had a strong sense that I have no recollection of my father ever expressing any of this towards me.
Any of
Today,
this?
when
What
I
is
was
the this?
the condemnation, the not being good enough, not cutting it, not suffice, not being perfect. I don't have any recollection of him ever expressing that towards me. But today, during the forgiveness, it was so, I heard him say it several times. It was towards himself, and that was under the influence of alcohol when I was growing up, and he
Right.
was completely hammering on himself for being totally no good. And
And you were in the
also,
field
I've
of it.
heard him. I was definitely in the field of it, and it's the same actually with my mom's power person dynamic message. I never really have her do it towards me, uh, but her doing it towards dad. So it's like I've just I've internalized, I've taken on uh, what they were doing in between themselves, but then to themselves and in between themselves. But then today, again, my grandfather was my father's father. My
Right.
grandfather was so vividly present, and it the sense was so strongly that my father, because I've heard my father say about his father that he never ever got praised, or that he never was any good,
Right.
and he's saying us the words that he wasn't good enough. And having gone through that, and during the worksheet today, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and I got a strong urge to consume alcohol. I mean, it
Mm.
was visceral.
Yep.
I wanted to
That's cleaning
drink
up for dad.
alcohol.
That's it.
And he was about 16, 17 when he turned to alcohol. That's from what I heard.
Right. Well, it's
So it
interesting.
was powerful.
Yeah, that's like beyond powerful. That's just right so on track. It's interesting. Carl Jung, one of the things he said in some of his writing was that one of the greatest burdens of the child is the unlived life of the parent.
Mm.
And again, it's another thing that needs to be forgiven. Go for it. Breathe into it. How awesome would it have been as a kid been able to have been the salve for your dad's pain and self mutilation. And so that would be another powerful worksheet, just to cancel the goal to fix dad, to fix mom in relationship to dad, to have mom approve of, embrace, cherish dad, goals dad to cherish himself. And how honestly do you suppose, with the fact that your grandfather comes in here, do you suppose your dad probably sat and watched his dad as he destroyed himself? Breathing with you. Now notice you got a whole family right now all over the world just holding the space for you, Peter. And your dad, and your mom, and your grandfather. This is what was meant in Aramaic by the kingdom of heaven, the community of love. This is what we all need. So each one of us is breathing with you.
I used the phrase of saying that I've lost to fear when it comes to the archery. Say I've done 100 competition is probably not enough, but say I've done 200 competition, and the score is now Peter 2 and Fear 198. And the one time that I was maintain love present, conscious, active, and present, no effort whatsoever. I was Swedish Championship 2022, and my father was there, not partaking, only looking at it. And after, I mean, I was in bliss, as close as bliss can be, doing something
Experiencing your
like
human
that.
life. You were in
Yeah,
love. Yeah, that's what you're
it was,
describing.
and I could have gone on forever. It was totally effortless. And I remember my father, when he came up afterwards, because he was with binoculars behind the, like you were when you were looking there,
Right,
and
right.
when he came up to me when it was all done, and I was still joyful, and he hugged me, which he very, very seldom did on his own accord. And he started crying, and he cried, and I don't know if I've ever seen
Mm.
him do that sober. So just like with what the one that broke, now that I started to cry with, when you mentioned me, I think you said me living his life.
Yeah,
And to me, now that I haven't made that connection before, but his experience and his crying there was because I was able to take myself and him through that, uh, doing archery from the place of being. So I was, and he was kind of riding along with that. It was not for me that he was crying. I think
got it.
it was for him that he
You
broke
put them
through
right into
something there.
process. You put them
Yeah.
right into process. What a gift. So here's my offering. I know you're not an artist, but I'd suggest you get some art supplies out and do a picture of that. Create a picture of that for yourself and put it somewhere prominently in your house. And every time you look at it, breathe. For him and for you. And probably for your grandfather. Because chances are your grandfather never had the opportunity to see that with his son.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that one. I haven't seen that one before.
Yeah, I'd draw a picture of it. I don't know what your art skills are. It might be very primitive. It might be very, well done. I don't know what your art skills are, but whatever they are, I'd take what your sensation is, what your emotion is, what your experience is of that, and I'd put it on paper and maybe write about it as well, in as deep a way as you can. That whole, like every sensation. What did the air feel like? What did the crowd sound like in the background? What what was the sky? Was it sunny? Were there clouds? Were there trees? Were there flowers? How many targets were up there in front of the competition? I do everything that your senses can possibly garner from that, gather from that, and put it in a piece of art.
Yeah, I think we stay with the poetry. I think drawing it won't be. I think we stay with poetry.
Put it on paper too. Put it in art as well.
Okay.
Even if
I can blow.
even if it looks like, Arya at 6 drew it for you.
I can blow my nose on a piece of paper.
Yeah. Powerful.
Yeah,
But
this was a new one for me.
that's what
This is strong.
yeah, that's what healing of generations looks like. That's what it looks like. Bringing those dynamics to the presence of active love. When a different part of my persona, a different power person dynamic is moving in me. When I can bring the visceral experience of the active presence of love. You've heard me share before that when I do that love exchange, when I need to get connected to that space, I go back to the moment where I'm in our bedroom at home and my daughter's head is delivering into my hands, and she opens her eyes as crystal clear as you can imagine, looks at me, laser focused in my eyes, and grins at me, and literally sent me into another dimension. Document that for yourself. That will be when the chips are up, the stress is up and the chips are down, and the next layer is up. That will be the thing that will key you in to the most accelerated mode of processing that you'll be able to do. And in those moments when that opens, that's where you can literally do lifetimes of work in virtually an instant.
Thank you. And I meant to ask you this several times, and now I remember, so I will. Did your daughter get her name Krista Joy due to that?
Yes,
Is
we had not named Krista before her birth. It was when that happened
yeah.
that I mean, it just flooded me. This is the joy of Christ. This is the mind of active love, human life coming into the world, and that's when she was named in that instant. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. I
we
meant
had
to ask
no
you that
idea.
several
We
times.
had no idea what we were going to call her. It was that moment that her name, and we both agreed that that was her name at that moment.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. So breathing fully with you right down to the tip of the toes, right up to the top of the head, right into the depth of your genes. And there are lots of folks, I don't know if you've looked at the comments, but Carrie says, appreciating Peter's process, called in with a parental experience on my mind. So it was perfect timing. Lots of hearts, lots of thanks and appreciation.
Attesting to that, thank you, and attesting to that part of how down to what we call physiology is changing. I remember during one of the days in the quantum still point this summer, where I came back to you and said that because both you and Tina said that I look taller,
Right.
and
Yes.
then I went down to the basement bathroom,
Right.
and I realized that I was taller because I hit my head in the ventilation then, and I didn't do that previously. So when I stood straight and looked into the mirror, so I experienced that time as well, that my physiology actually changed
Yeah.
in the healing process.
Well, and when we, getting down to the truth is the only way healing occurs. We've got all kinds of beliefs, we've got all kinds of perceptions, and there are a lot of teachings out there that work with getting people to shift their perception around. And if one's working within the perceptual mind, you can make improvements, but those improvements are much like moving the deck chairs in the Titanic around. The inevitable is still going to happen. But when we step out of that into being, and the work is done from that level of being rather than just shifting things around in the mind, that's when eternal consequences come about. That's like, that advertisement, the real thing. That's the real thing. Sally says she's breathing with you, Peter. Then we all are. That's just awesome. I wish we'd gotten the personal code earlier today because we'd see such a change in it tomorrow. It's interesting. I remember the first time that Dr. Tim came to an intensive, and of course, the personal code is part of it. And after we did the personal code, I'm doing some presentation on, and I talk about the changes that we'll see by the end of the 9-day intensive. And Dr. Tim's like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" Oh, well, 9 days from now, we'll see 50, 60, 70, 80 point changes on a scale of 100 for some people who just did this. And Dr. Tim was like, "Go get out of here. No. I do this type of testing. We use it to get a baseline, but that's a lifetime thing. Those things don't change." It's like, well, you're going to see them change with first century Aramaic forgiveness. And again, we see, 50, 60, 70 point changes happening. So would have been fun to have had it today, but we'll get it tomorrow and see where it goes from there.
Well, I think I'm complete, so I think there's no more to be done. I'm finished.
We're here to hold the space, and thank you for your willingness. It's like it's such an example for everybody. It's just powerful. So in deep appreciation for you.
Well, I was going to extend thanks to Sally and whoever is breathing as I'm breathing, and thinking of the quote of Einstein, if you think that you're separate from anyone else. Because share one more thing, the forgiveness worksheet earlier today, with my grandfather being so readily present, I mean, I thought about this before and I know this, but it came so strongly that my grandfather, he was at the hospital having just removed one of his lungs due to lung cancer, and this was 1968, so it was uncommon at that time to actually do that kind of operation.
Right.
And at the same time, my mom was delivering me at at the same hospital, but just another
area. Wow.
And my father, he also had tumor in his lungs. So yeah, let's breathe for all now, everyone and all.
Well, you've got Joanne and Sally Jane and Carrie and her whole crew, Celinda, somebody who's a guest we don't know when we see a guest show up, and of course Jeannie, Cammie, and Natalie. You've got all of those holding this space for you. They're the ones that show up on my screen here, and then who's behind that? Who else is there? I have no way of knowing, but and then who will listen to this in the future and be touched by it? So Linda says she's borrowing the benefits for myself and my family, up and down lines and blessings. That's from Celinda. So yeah, this is exactly what the words from the Aramaic, not the Greek misinterpretation. It's exactly what the words kingdom of heaven mean. It's just a community connected in love that's here to hold the space for the real work of Yeshua. And of course, when you look at the depth especially if somebody's doing something like this on their own. You can certainly understand why when Yeshua gave his disciples specific instructions of what they had to do, they said, too hard a saying, who can hear it? And they walked with him no more. They left. So thanks for your courage. Thanks for hanging out for the last 30 years. It's awesome. I look forward to the next layer and the next level.
Thank you.
Absolutely honored and delighted. And if anybody else has any other thoughts to drop in the comments, we've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody else has a thought to throw in there, just pop it in the comment or hit the call button. And beyond that, we extend our presence and our love to your two beautiful boys and your wife, and holding each of you in our hearts. And we'll look forward to the next time we get to see each of you.
Ditto.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. It's just amazing to have so many people there holding the space and taking this work to the next level, and remembering the principle from A Course in Miracles. It says, when you are healed, you are never healed alone. Just presencing this depth of understanding on the planet literally makes it available to every mind on the planet. Each piece of work that each of us does brings it into this level of expression and makes it available. And that's what this is all about. That's what this whole body of work is about, making this level of understanding, this level of comprehension, this level of work available literally to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And if you're ready to take it to the next level, remember there's a self-study codependence intensive you can register for and do at home. And the end of May, May the 21st, I believe it is, through the end of May, the last 9 days of May, we've got a 9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive, residential here, happening in Virginia. And we will be doing, at least so far, according to a couple of requests, we'll probably be doing some quantum still point work both before and after that intensive. So if you're ready to take it all to the next level, make plans to be with us the last week in May. And we haven't heard back yet on whether or not it might be possible to do the intuitive development intensive following that. We'll let you know as soon as we find out. So thank you all for joining us. Honored and delighted that you're here with us, holding the space for the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. And Peter, so appreciative of the work you're willing to do. What city is it going to be? It's actually going to be in Abingdon, Virginia, just outside of Bristol. There's a really wonderful retreat center there called the Jubilee House that we've used before for residential intensive. So we've got rooms, they're private or double rooms available. We're going to be doing an awesome food program called the Nutritarian program, where people get the chance to put their hands on the food, have recipes, and to really feed themselves real food that is awesome tasting. And so that's what we'll be doing at the end of
Good name for a venue, Jubilee House.
Jubilee House, exactly. Yes.
You go.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody. Much appreciation. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.